So, hi everyone, how are you all? I'm sure you all are fine at your places. So, we were doing chapter number second, the demographic structure of Indian society. All right, and today I'm going to start exactly from where I left in the last class. Okay, so what we did in the last class, hmm? we started that this particular chapter with the introduction of demography. We understood the meaning of demography and we understood the types of demography. Then after that we also studied the emergence of demography, and with that emergence of sociology as well, right? And after that, what we studied the important indicators, or you can also call them concepts of population, right? Okay, so today I'm going to start after all these things. And remember that you have to mark certain things in your textbook, right? So open up page number 12 on your textbook. Open up page number 12. Open up page number 12. Okay. So what you have to do here is that you have to mark certain things in your textbook. So open up page number 12. Can you see the word Emile Durkheim on the third line of 12 number page? So you have to mark right from Emile Durkheim. Emile Durkheim famous study explaining the variation in suicide rates across different countries. So you have to mark this entire line right from Emile Durkheim up to different countries. You can mark it with your pencil, or you can use your highlighter as well. I would recommend you to use your highlighter, but if you don't have, then you can use your pencil as well. Then after that, you have to mark another thing on the same page. You have to go to the third line of Malthusian theory of population growth. You have to go to the third line where it is written that essay on population. You have to go to that particular line. Third line of Malthusian theory of population growth. You have to mark this on the same page, right? On page number 12. So you have to mark here essay on population. So essay on population was written by Thomas Robert Malthus. So you have to mark these two things because these two things may come in your short answer type questions, 1 marks question or 2 marks question, right? So it may come in that form, and that's what you need to do. Okay. So now I'm going to share my PPT with all of you. Okay. So you have to, okay. So Urvi is saying, sir, can you please repeat the earlier one? You have to go on the page number 12 and you have to go on the third line where it is written that, so I told you, you have to go on the page number 12 and you have to go on the third line, number third line, where it is written that, where it is written that, let me see. I have to check it again. So Uvi, you have to go to the page number 12, where you have to mark from the third line, and what you have to mark is Emile Durkheim. This is the name of sociologist. So Emile Durkheim was the one who did study on suicide rates. So you have to mark this. Emile Durkheim famous study explaining the variation in suicide rates across different countries. You have to mark this. After that, you have to mark that third line from Malthusian theory of population growth, where essay on population was written by Robert Malthus. All right. So now I'm going to share the PPT. We're going to do, we're going to do the remaining of the slide. Okay. Okay. I'm sure my PPT is visible on your screens. So as you can see that we started the chapter with the introduction of demography. We did types of demography, and after that we did study emergence of demography with emergence of sociology. Then after that we studied these concepts or indicators of population, right? And it was important for all of you to understand these common concepts, because today you're going to see what you're going to see. You're going to see the usage of these concepts or indicators in the two theories that I'm going to discuss with all of you, right? The theory of demographic transition, and the second one is Malthusian theory of population growth. So we're going to do these two theories, right? Okay. Okay. So we're going to start with theory of demographic transition. Now look what happens. When we study this theory of demographic transition, then we understand the transition in the demographic structure of a society. Then we understand the change. Transition means change in the demographic structure of Indian society or any kind of society, right, in the world. So what this theory says that basically this theory is going to talk about birth rate and death rate, right? So I'm sure you know that, and I hope you know that what is birth rate and what is death rate is all about, related to birth and related to death. All right. So theory of demographic transition is a theory that throws light on changes in birth rate and death rate, and consequently on the growth rate of population, right? Now growth rate is something that depends on birth rate and death rate. If there is more birth rate and if there is less death rate, then there is going to be, more difference between birth rate and death rate. If more people are getting birth and less are dying, it means that population is always going to grow, right? So population is always going to high. we're going to see we're going to see here three conditions. We're going to see three conditions in this particular theory. In one condition, your growth rate is going to be low. In the second condition, growth rate is going to be very high. And in the third condition, growth rate is again going to be very low, right? So growth rate all depends on birth rate and death rate, right? And we're going to understand that. And how phase one comes means stage one comes. You can call it phase one or stage one. How phase one comes, how phase two comes, and then how eventually at the end phase three comes, right? We're going to understand that. So as I've already told you that theory of demographic transition is a theory that throws light on the changes in the birth rate and death rate. I'm sure you can see all these things on your screens, right? I'm using my cursor to actually show you from where I'm reading. The theory of demographic transition is a theory that throws light on changes in birth rate and death rate, and consequently on the growth rate of population, right? This theory suggests that population growth is linked to overall levels of economic development, and every society follows a typical pattern of development related to population growth. Now, what does it mean? It means that this theory is actually linked to overall levels of economic development. Look, the socio-economic level of a society or the economic level of society is definitely gonna, play its role a lot. Because if any society is, look, if any society is, financially stable, if any society has good socio-economic level, then that society is always going to provide good health and medical facilities to its citizens, right? So people are going to get good, medical facilities. So in that way, there will be less chances of them to die, right? Because during health problems, they're gonna, go to hospitals, and they're gonna seek that good good health and medical facilities, and this is always going to be good for the citizens, right? So in that way, the death rate can be controlled, right? So this is what this line means, that population growth is linked to overall levels of economic development. If economic development is there, people are going to get good health and medical facilities, so their population is always going to grow, right? And the second aspect that this theory talks about is that every society follows a typical pattern of development related population growth. Now every society goes through a particular pattern of development, I would say. Every society is underdeveloped in its first phase, then that society develops a little bit or is in developing stage, like our own nation India is in developing societies. India is a developing country, so India is in phase second, right? And this phase is also known as transitional phase, because there has been a change that has come from underdevelopment to 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 developing societies. So there is a transition, there is a change that has come. Earlier India was underdeveloped, but now India is developing, so there has been a change, and that change uh, can be called as transition. So that's the reason we call second phase or developing societies or second stage as transitional stage, right? Look, what is happening here is that we are referring every phase or every stage with what? With different countries, with different societies, right? And then talking about the third phase, then third phase also comes, that is developed societies or developed countries, the European countries, Spain, Portugal, France, and also American countries, or Spain, right? UK, Britain, Italy. So all these are developed nations. These all are developed countries, right? Or developed societies. So I'm sure now you understand that this theory throws light on birth rate and death rate, and consequently on growth rate of population. Then this theory talks about the two aspects, that every society is uh, linked to overall levels of economic development. Economic development is going to play a huge role, in the development of the society. And after that, every society goes through these phases. These phases are somewhere inevitable. This is going to happen with every society. Not every society finds itself in a developed phase, right? Straight away. Every society goes through underdeveloped phase, then developing phase, then to developed phase. So that's what this line means, that every society follows a typical pattern of development related population growth, right? So in every phase or in every stage, we're going to talk about birth rate, death rate, and eventually the growth rate. Okay, so talking about underdeveloped society, this is a phase number one, right? Now, what happens in underdeveloped societies? Birth rate is high. Now, why birth rate is high in underdeveloped society? Many African nations, come under underdeveloped societies, right? Now, many African nations or other nations which are undeveloped, they all come under undeveloped societies. Now, in those societies, your birth rate is always high. Now, why birth rate is high? Because people are not educated. they are unaware of the advantages of having small families. So they are not educated, and they don't even care of you know keeping their families within certain limits in terms of numbers. So their families are always huge, their families have large number of members in it. So because of the uneducation or uneducated people, the birth rate is high in underdeveloped societies. Then death rate, talking about the death rate is also high in these underdeveloped societies. Why? Because health and medical facilities are not available. And as I've already told you that when health and medical facilities are not available, then people are, you know, people are more likely to die, right? Because at the right time, they are not going to get the health and medical facilities. So with this, I'm sure you have understood that why death rate is high in these societies and why birth rate is high in these societies. Look, the reasons for birth rate and death rate are always going to be linked with your education, with good health and medical facilities. So this is how we're going to understand this theory. Then talking about the developing societies, right? Talking with the developing societies. So in these societies, birth rate is high. You can take an example of your own nation, right? In our nation, birth rate is high because not all the people are educated. Many are illiterate also, and they are ignorant. And how we can say that they are ignorant? Because they are uneducated, and because they are illiterate. So they don't try to become aware of having small family. So they lack in that particular aspect. So people are illiterate and ignorant, and they always, what they do is that they always prefer male child. Since our society is patriarchal society where there is a men domination, so what happens in societies like these is that these societies always prefer male child, right? So people are unaware, people are uneducated, right? So birth rate is always high. They wanted, they want to have, male child. So in order to, you know, have male child, they keep on giving birth to babies or children, right? So that's where we lack, I think. So that's the reason birth rate is high. Then I'm going to talk about death rate in developing societies. Now, death rate is low. Death rate is low in our developing societies. Why? Because of the good health and medical facilities. You can see that our birth rate is high. I'm always going to take example of our own nation, right? Since we've got example of our own nation, why would we take the name of any other nation? So death rate is low comparatively because of the good health and medical facilities, right? So people are more likely to save their lives because they are provided with good health and medical facilities, right? So now we're going to understand the phase number 3 in the form of developed societies. You can call it phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, right? And you can refer with the underdeveloped societies, developing societies, and after that your developed societies, right? So what happens in developed societies? You can take the example of various European countries and also various countries from American continent as well, right? So what happens here is that birth rate is low. Now, why birth rate is low? I have already told you that birth rate is always going to be linked with education because people are educated here and they are aware of having advantages of having small family, right? So birth rate is low in developed society because people are educated and are aware of advantages of having small families. So they always try to keep their families as small as they can. And death rate is low, and when death rate is low, population is always going to low, right? So what happens in developing, in underdeveloped societies? I'm talking about the phase number 1. In these societies, population is low because birth rate is high, but death rate is also high. So most of the people which are getting birth are dying eventually because of the lack of medical facilities. So with that, we can understand that population is going to low because birth rate is actually cutting down by your death rate. But in developing society, in our societies, growth rate is always high because many people are taking birth, because since many people are taking birth and death rate is low, so birth rate is high. So what happens in these societies, there's always a concept of population explosion that comes. You know, when population is very high, you all know that India has a very high population, over 130 crores or over 1.3 billion. So birth rate is high and death rate is low, and because of that, population results in greater intensity. So that's the reason the concept of population explosion comes in the developing societies. All right, because many people are, you know, there in such societies. But in when we talk about the growth rate of developed societies, their population is low because they are not giving, you know, more births, and their death rate is also low. So there's not a much difference between birth rate and death rate. When there is a lot of difference between birth rate and death rate, then we are always going to have more population. But when we're going to have less difference between birth rate and death rate, then we're going to have less population. It's as simple as you can understand this. All right. Now there is one concept that comes out of the second phase, that is developing phase, or the stage of developing. And what is that concept? Population explosion. Right now we're going to understand the population explosion. Okay, so this is also theory of demographic transition. Primitive stage, second stage, third stage, they are also the same that I've taught you just now, right? Okay, underdeveloped societies or countries, developing societies or countries, and stage three is developed societies, right? Okay, so concept of population explosion. Remember that population explosion or concept of population explosion comes from the second phase, comes from the second phase in which we talk about the developing society, in which we talk about the developing countries like our own nation, India. Now, we all know that population growth is very high, or the growth rate is very high in such countries, but it's a matter of concern as well. Now, how? We're going to study that. Concept of population explosion. Between these two stages is a transitional stage. So since you all know that, all you know that second phase is also known as transition phase, out of which concept of population explosion comes. So what happens here is that this population explosion happens because birth rate are brought down relatively quickly through advanced methods of disease control, public health, and better nutrition. However, it takes long for society to adjust to change, and it's also its reproductive behavior, you know, all those things we understand. And in India, the demographic transition is not yet complete, as the mortality rate has been reduced, but the birth rate has not been brought down to the same extent. Look, this theory of demographic transition has not yet completed in India, because India is still in phase second. You know, it will get completed only when India will reach the phase number third, right? Then only the theory of demographic transition will complete as far as our Indian society is concerned. Now, I also told you that it's a matter of concern. Now, how it's a matter of concern? Look, we have got very limited resources. And in that limited resources, we have great population to, you know, so we find it very difficult to actually cater the needs of these population, right? We have a great population in Madhya Pradesh, we have great population in UP, but the resources are limited. So when resources are limited and population is very high, then at times, in fact, every time it becomes very difficult to cater the needs of everyone, right? So that's the reason it's a matter of concern, right? Now, I'm sure you have understood the theory of demographic transition. We're going to talk about now about the next theory. Okay, population explosion, same thing. Now we're going to talk about the Malthusian theory of population growth. Look, what happens in this theory? Here also we're going to talk about, you know, birth rate, and here also we're going to talk about the production that we get from, earth resources that we get from the earth. So this is something that Malthusian theory is all about. So Thomas Robert Malthus wrote this theory in his book or in his essay, which was on population. I have already made you mark this particular line, that essay on population was written by Robert Malthus. So it may come in the exam that who is the author of this essay on population. Then you can write that Thomas Robert Malthus is the author or was the author of this essay on population. So what happens? So what he argues or what he tells us in this theory, I'm talking about Robert Malthus. He argued that human population tend to grow at a much faster rate than the rate at which the means of human subsistence. Now, what is human subsistence? It's your food, right? That all human beings need. But also clothing and other agriculture based products, right? So resources can be in the form of food, resources can be in the form of clothing, resources can be in the form of other things that human needs for its subsistence, right? So what he said in this theory is that he said that human population is growing at much faster rate. But on the other hand, the human subsistent resources that human beings need, they are not growing at much faster rate. So he was actually worried about this situation. And that's what he has tried to express in his theory. All right. So now we're going to go to the next page. Okay. So this is a very, good flow chart to understand this theory. Now, what this theory says is that, as I've already told you, that Malthus was actually worried about the relation between population growth and food production. He said that there is an imbalance. Look at that. There is an imbalance between population growth and food production. And he said that the population growth is at much higher rate rather than the growth of food production. So how he expressed the population growth and how he expressed food production? He expressed population growth and food production by using, two different things. GP means geometric progression and AP means arithmetic progression. So he used geometric progression for population growth and he used arithmetic progression for food production, right? He said that population growth is fast. On the other hand, food production is slow. So when I say geometric progression, just look at that. The numbers are doubling itself. The numbers are doubling. 2 is doubling itself, becoming 4. 4 is doubling itself and becoming 8, and then 8 to 16, 16 to 32. So it's pretty fast as compared to the arithmetic progression that is going with a constant pace. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So there is a constant progression that is going on in food production. 2, then addition of 2, 4, then addition of 2, 6, then addition of 2, 8, then 10, then it just goes on, right? But our population is increasing at much faster rate. So he was worried about this imbalance, right? And he said that this uneven growth leads to an imbalance in society, which results in hunger, poverty. So he was of the view that if this imbalance will continue like that, then it will result in a very grave situation in the society, right? We're going to face hunger, we're going to face poverty in the society. People are going to die due to starvation, lack of food, right? So that's what he was trying to hint at. And he also gave solution to this imbalance. So what he said in his solution is that he talked about two check, means two measures, positive check and preventive check. In positive check, he talked about the pandemic. Look, I've written COVID. I've written this COVID-19 in the example of pandemic so that all of you can understand. I hope you are trying to relate what I'm trying to tell you. So what happens in pandemic? So the population, just dies, and dies in great number. And this is what exactly happening in this entire world, isn't it? So positive checks are those checks that takes, you know, that cuts down the population. When pandemic comes, in the form like now it is coming in the form of COVID-19, so many people die. Epidemic is also a, spread of disease in a particular area. Spread of disease in a particular area is epidemic. Suppose if we're talking about any disease that is spread in a particular state or in a particular nation, and it is confined to a particular geographical area, and that's what epidemic is all about. Pandemic is something that is global, that is international, right? Just like COVID-19 is going on right now. So pandemic, epidemic, and famine, you know, various disease that comes in our society, they all cut the population. Many people die due to these reasons. So this was the first solution that he gave in the form of positive check to control the growth of population. As he said that the population was growing at much faster rate. Then he talks about the preventive check, in which he said that people can postpone their marriage, right? People can postpone their marriage, or they can practice celibacy. Celibacy means they remain unmarried throughout their lives. So he gave certain, solutions in order to cut the population, in order to stop the growth of population, right? So this is what theory of Malthusian was all about. And I am sure, I hope you've understood this theory of demographic transition and Malthusian theory of population growth as well. I'm sure you have understood both these two theories, right? Okay, so this is a definition of epidemic and pandemic, right? So epidemic, the term epidemic was derived from the Greek word demos and all those things. So remember that epidemic is something that is confined to a particular geographical area, right? It is not confined, uh, it is not spread to the global world, right? It is epidemic is something that is confined to a particular geographical area, like in a state, in a nation, or in a country, right? But pandemic is something. Look, I've written the example of COVID-19. So COVID-19 is a pandemic, right? Because it has been all over the world, right? So I'm sure you've understood. Okay, this is the same thing. Positive check, preventive check, the solutions that were given by Robert Malthus. So same thing. Okay, criticism of Malthusian theory. Look, criticism of Malthusian theory is also important. So Malthus was worried about this imbalance between population growth and food production. But there was a criticism that was done, regarding this theory. Many people said that what many people said that if people are not having resources, this is not due to the lack of resources. This is due to the unequal distribution of resources, right? So critics, look at the second last, criticism point. The critics argued that population like poverty and starvation were caused by the unequal distribution of economic resources rather than by population growth. So Malthus or Robert Malthus was saying that only population is responsible for the poverty, for the starvation. But people said that basically resources are not equally distributed. That's the reason of poverty and that's the reason of starvation. And they also said that an unjust social system allowed a wealthy and privileged minorities to live in luxury, while the vast majority of the people were forced to live in poverty. So this criticism point is also linked to the previous one, that only few people have the resources, only few people are dominating. On the other hand, many people are not having resources. Either they are having less resources or they have got no resources. So it's unequal distribution, right? And look at the first criticism point. The pattern of population growth began to change in the later half of the 19th century, and by the end of the first quarter of the 20th century, these changes were quite uh, dramatic. Birth rates had declined and outbreaks of epidemic diseases were being controlled. Malthus' predictions were proved false because the food production and standard of living continued to rise despite of the population growth, right? So what is happening before 19th century was actually, you know what happened? Something that was happening before 19th century didn't happen after the 19th century. Population was growing, but at the same time, production was also growing, right? Industries were coming. They were producing, products in a larger scale. So with the help of industries, with the help of fast production, people were being able to, cater the needs of the population. That what Malthus was thinking, he was thinking that this is not going to happen. But despite population growth, standard of living continued to rise, right? It was not like the, it was not like the population was wholly responsible for the starvation or poverty, but other reasons were also there. So these all were the criticism of the Malthusian theory, right? I'm sure you have understood this as well. Okay. And birth rate had also declined. How birth rate had declined? Because people were getting education, they were becoming aware of advantages of having smaller families, and epidemic diseases were also controlled. The people started formulating vaccines, and they also controlled the epidemic disease. So people were getting good control over this imbalance, right? So that's why Malthusian theory or his prediction proved false eventually, because everything was seen under control. So that's why many people criticize this particular theory. All right, I'm sure you have understood this Malthusian theory, criticism of Malthusian theory, and demographic transition theory as well. So this was what today's class was all about. Okay, so now I'm stopping this share. Okay, so okay, I'm sure you've understood everything. So kindly text me in the chat box. I want to know your reviews. Have you understood anything or not? Did you like this class or not? Kindly review me. Kindly text me in the chat box. I'm waiting for your messages. If you can hear me, then you can text me. I want to know your reviews. I want to know, did you like this class or not? Have you enjoyed this class or not? So kindly text me, everyone.
Can you explain Malthusian theory?
Okay, Malthusian theory. Okay, I will. Don't worry. Now look what happens in Malthusian theory. So Robert Malthus is actually worried about the imbalance that's there between population growth and food production. He says that population is growing at much faster rate as compared to the food production. Food production is growing in geometric progression. So no, population growth is progressing or is growing through geometric progression. He has used this term geometric progression in order to show that population growth is at the much faster rate as compared to food production, right? So look at that. You can see, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So every number is doubling itself. So population growth is at much faster rate as compared to food production. On the other hand, food production is not growing at much faster rate, right? He's talking about the imbalance. Because if we will not have enough food, then how are we going to survive? Look, when there is more population and when there is, at the same time, when there is less food production, there is always going to be imbalance, because all the human beings need food to eat, right? They all need something to eat. And if we will not have enough food, or if we will not have enough food production, then the population is going to die, right? So he was talking about these two things: population growth and food production. Population growth is growing faster. On the other hand, food production is not growing faster, right? So he used these two terms, GP and AP. GP means geometric progression for population growth, and AP for arithmetic progression for food production, right? And after that, he also gave few solutions. He said that this imbalance can uh, only be corrected or only be amended if there will be any cut, or if there will be any stoppage of this population. Because if population will continue to grow like that, then people will die due to starvation, people will die due to lack of food, right? So this can happen. So he was talking about the two solutions. He gave two solutions: positive check and preventive measure. In positive check, he talked about the pandemic, epidemic, disease that comes in the society and then takes the lives of many people. And you may relate this to the real, present situation that is going on right now in the form of COVID-19. Many people are dying. So what is happening due to this? Many people are dying. The population growth is coming down, or the population is, going down to less level, right? That's what actually happening. And the second example that or solution that he gave was in the form of preventive check, in which he talked about postponing marriage. Because if people will postpone marriage, then there will be, less birth rate. If people will practice celibacy means people remain unmarried throughout their lives. If people will remain unmarried throughout their lives, this will also, stop birth rate, right? And these two are examples in the form of positive check and preventive check, or two solutions in the form of preventive check and positive check, are actually there to reduce the birth rate, so that the balance can be achieved between population growth and food production, right? So I'm sure now you have understood this. So I'm sure you have understood this. Okay, I have to check the message. Okay. You're welcome, Archita. So Saurabh, have you understood? Kindly text me, because I really want to know your reviews. Your doubts are very important for me, because if your doubts won't be clear, then I don't think this session will be of any use. I want all of you to understand everything. I want all of you to have comprehensive understanding of everything, right? That's why I'm discussing everything, but taking a lot of pain, right?
Yes,
Understood?
sir, I understood. Can you?
What did you say, Saurav? You can text me. You can text me also. You can text me also. I have to take you. I have to unmute you. Okay, so Saurav, you have understood. Okay. Okay. Demographic dividend. Okay. Demographic dividend. Okay, okay. Definitely, I'll definitely make you understand this. Demographic dividend. All right. So can you see this PPT on your screens? Can you see that? Hmm? Okay, demographic. Look, demographic dividend is a very positive situation. It's a very good situation when a country is having demographic dividend. The situation is very good. Look, we have got three kinds of group: first group, second group, third group. First group is that group that's age range is between 0 to 14, right? The second group is from 15 to 64, and third group is all those people who are elder, who are over 64. So we've got three kinds of group, right? Demographic situation is that situation. And remember that group number second, right from 15 to 40, right to 15 to, you know 64. So I'm saying, I'm talking about the group number second. Look, when population of group second, we can also call it working population. When working population or population of second group is more than the non-working population, I'm talking about non-working population. Under non-working population, your children comes, the children between 0 to 14 and the elder people who are over 64. So when the population of working group is more than non-working population, then it is a condition of demographic dividend. Right now, there is a demographic dividend situation that is going on in our nation, right? Now we have more working population than non-working population. And what happens when we have more working population? Then there is less burden on the working population to carry the needs of non-working population, right? So working population feels, a little bit free as compared to do their duties, or as compared to cater the needs of the non-working population. So when working population is more than non-working population, then you can say that there are there are there are more people working in our country than non-working people. So it's always good to have more working people in a country, and that's always give rise to demographic dividend, right? I'm sure you have understood this. Kindly text me fast. Okay. So Saurabh, you have understood this. Okay. So the time has come to say you goodbye, right? But before I say you goodbye, I want to request you, one thing, that I want all of you to do revision, right? I want all of you to revise as much as you can and do some hard work and refer my PPT. It's very easy, and you're going to understand everything from my PPT. I've prepared this PPT in such a way that all of you will definitely understand everything out of this if you will, work hard and see what is there in the PPT. So I request all of you to do as much as revision as you can, because if you won't work hard, then my work, the work that I'm putting, or my hard work, or the efforts that I'm putting, that will be of no use, right? My hard work won't be of any use if you will not work hard, right? So I'm sure that you will work hard and utilize your time as much as you can, and definitely see PPT and see my video. I'll post both these. Obviously, I've already posted the PPT in the group, and now I'll post this video as well. So you can see the video, you can refer PPT and try to get the best understanding of the chapter, right? I'm putting a lot of hard work, and I'm sure you will put as well. Okay, so I'm ending this session with a very beautiful quotation of Aristotle. Look, who was Aristotle? Aristotle was a great philosopher and a great, uh, I would say, sociologist or philosopher, and he was scientist as well. So he was a Greek philosopher, and he was master or teacher of Alexander. Alexander was the first world conqueror, right? He conquered the entire world. So you can well imagine that the master or the teacher of Alexander the Great, I'm talking about Aristotle, what kind of knowledge or wisdom he would have. So he once said that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Now, what it means that mere involvement of your brain or your mind is not going to work. You got to involve your heart as well. So you got to have the involvement of your heart, you got the involvement of your mind as well in order to get the best understanding, and then all you will able to get best out of your education. And this is what the ultimate aim of education is all about. Then only you will able to use your education in your lives, and that should be the ultimate the ultimate aim of human beings, right? I'm sure you have enjoyed this class, and until then, take care all, stay safe, stay at home, and God bless you all. Bye bye.